Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I hope you had a great networking session, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the Nonprofit Resource Hub's very first half-day board development conference. If you did not meet me in the networking room, my name is Alison Ferlita. I'm the executive director with the Nonprofit Resource Hub. We're also known as the Hub or NRH. Before we get started, I would like to let everybody know that we are going to have a Q&A session at the end of our keynote speaker presentation. Please be sure, if you have a question, to click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen so we don't miss your questions. And for those of you unfamiliar with the Hub, please allow me a moment to give you some background. The NRH is a trade association, and our mission is to serve, be a resource to educate and connect our members to the nonprofit community. At the same time, we serve the nonprofit sector by connecting nonprofit organizations to resources and to each other. So the question is, how do we do this? And we do it in a variety of ways. We provide our nonprofit partners with access to professional webinars. We create meet and greet opportunities that are in person and virtual. We also offer a virtual Ask the Expert series for our nonprofit partners, and through our executive director, and I will use this term very loosely, group therapy meetings, also virtual. And now I'm so happy to say that we are also offering our very first board development conference to you. And the best part of this is that by design, the Nonprofit Resource Hub offers all of these benefits to the nonprofit sector free of charge. So this is another benefit of becoming a nonprofit partner with our organization. So the NRH is still a fairly young organization, and in order to realize our vision of being the trusted resource center for the sector, it's always important that we're continuously connecting and collaborating with the nonprofit community. Our nonprofit partners are just as invested in creating a central resource for the sector as we are. This past summer, we surveyed over 200 nonprofit organizations to learn what topics and issues were weighing on the minds of the leaders and their board members of our nonprofits. After reviewing the feedback, we knew there was a need for a board development conference just like this. We were immediately off and running, seeking out the top talent in the sector to present, discuss, and connect with you, our audience, about these pressing topics. I'm honored to say that we have some of the most notable names in the sector here with us today to share their stories, experiences, recommendations, and wisdom with you. We have a very impressive lineup of speakers from all areas of the sector to provide you with a variety of perspectives and hopefully ideas that will inspire you. It is our goal for you today to leave this afternoon with important information, a story or two that has moved you, and many new connections to grow your network of support. Today's agenda will offer you plenty of opportunity to learn as well as connect with the speakers and other attendees. We will have our keynote speaker, Arva, kick off the day, several breakout panels for you to choose from, and a facilitated discussion group with the leaders in the sector to close out our day. The agenda, if you need it, is available and visible to you on the top of your screen under the word sessions. I would like to extend my thanks and gratitude to our conference committee and the entire team who have worked tirelessly to plan and coordinate today's program. I'd also like to thank all of our speakers and moderators who have generously offered their time, talent, and expertise to provide our audience with the best possible experience today. My heartfelt thanks to all of you, truly. And now I'm really excited to introduce to you today's keynote speaker, Arva, President and CEO of the New York Urban League. Arva is not only a rock star in the nonprofit sector, but she's a passionate community leader, has dedicated herself to creating pathways to success for young people with the focus on girls and women. The New York Urban League is leading the way in which underserved African Americans are educated, employed, and empowered across the 5 boroughs. For the past 100 years, and that is a testament to this organization, they have inspired, influenced, and ignited over 1 million Black people to achieve their highest aspirations. And today, Arva stands at the helm. The years 2020 and 2021 presented Arva with one of the biggest challenges of her career. She was spearheading an organization faced with working through twin epidemics, COVID and systemic racism. Both, as you can imagine, had a significant impact on her organization, her team, and the community they serve. Today, she will share her story of how she and her team weathered the storm and teamed up with corporate partners to create a space to support, empower, and cultivate those in the NYUL community. She will also cover the importance of those collaborations and how all nonprofits can benefit as a result from their collaborating. So without further ado, I would like to extend a warm welcome to this year's NRH Conference keynote speaker, Arva Rice, President and CEO of the New York Urban League. Welcome, Arva.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Alison, for the invitation to speak before you this morning. I am deeply honored and humbled that you have asked me to join you for this important conversation. As they say in my faith tradition, I will not be before you long, but I did want to take this opportunity to thank you and all of our guests for their leadership and work throughout the COVID epidemic. I know that each and every one of you has a story to tell, and I thank you for inviting me to share mine. COVID expanded our vocabulary and has forever changed how we work. We learned pivot, you were on mute, and how to multitask with our cameras off and on. We also learned to innovate, to manage uncertainty, and care for others when we were hurting ourselves. That is why it is so important to have opportunities like Alison has created this morning to reflect and recharge, and I want to thank you again for that. As you heard in my introduction, I am Arva Rice, President and CEO of an organization who was founded when Black people were making the great transition from the South to the North during the Great Migration. We moved from picking cotton, tobacco, and oranges to living in big, bewildering cities. Folks came to the Urban League to help them find jobs, housing, and community. And 100 years later, that is still what we do. I am the second woman in the Urban League's 103-year history to serve as its leader. I have been chosen to lead an organization who helped integrate New York City public hospitals, created the first sleepaway camps for Black children, and opportunities for high school dropouts to get their GEDs in street academies. Before our centennial, we honored one of our graduates who did pretty well for himself, fashion icon Dapper Dan. And most recently, one of our urban leaguers became Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Braggs. The story of this institution is held in the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, who received its first grant from the Carnegie Foundation through the Urban League. Our organization gave out food, clothes, and haircuts during the Depression and walked with Mayor Lindsay in the 1960s to ensure riots did not break out in Harlem and in Bed-Stuy after Reverend King's death. So I should not have been surprised that we would be called upon during the epidemic. Like all of you on the call today, I was surprised and amazed when then Governor Cuomo put New York City on pause. I was close friends of a chief of staff of a citywide elected official, so I called and asked her, "Is this really real?" She assured me it was, but even then I left my office with 2 pens and a single notebook, thinking that the COVID thing would blow over in a few weeks. I could not have been more mistaken. Quite honestly, the next months are still a blur as we moved our programs and services online while still giving out food and support in person. The staff who were the service providers began to need support as members of their families fell ill or even passed away. The future of nonprofits seemed at risk. And as time passed, the inequities of the pandemic began to show. The commercials of TV personalities boasting, "We're all in this together," with their palatial kitchens and landscape lawns in the background, were in stark contrast to our everyday experience. Students in our school programming were shutting their cameras off so that no one could see their living conditions or not logging on at all. We were all in the same storm, but we were in very different boats. The inequity of access to quality information on COVID was startling. And then when the vaccine finally became available, it became painfully clear that the disease was impacting some communities more than others. Then came May 25th, 2020. The entire country and world saw the knee of a police officer on George Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Suddenly, millions were focused on the fact that in this country, some people are treated differently than others because of the color of their skin and often their zip code. It was sobering, not only for white people, but for Black people as well. Suddenly, we are being asked to speak on a topic that has been taboo in America for decades. But I'm getting ahead of myself. COVID-19 and the twin epidemic of racism have changed how nonprofits do their work and how they should engage with their workforce. This moment has created the Great Resignation, the Great Reset, and the Great Reshuffle. In 2021, 48 million people quit their jobs. In 2022, just under 4 million Americans continue to quit their jobs every single month. I know that personally, for the very first time in my nearly 30 years in nonprofits, I'm having a hard time getting applicants for open positions. Health and wellness have become central to worker retention, and the workforce wants to work for companies and nonprofits that have similar values as their own. Now, these trends may balance in the months to come with layoffs looming, but the fact that the labor force has new demands of workplaces is not going anywhere. The labor force wants to know your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, whether you are a nonprofit or a for-profit. And nonprofits have some serious work to do in this area. In a study by Community Wealth Partners, 79% of board chairs and executive directors of nonprofits are white. This share contrasts with the general population, which is 60% white, and with the overall nonprofit workforce, which is 68% white. In addition, over 92% of foundation executives are white. There's clearly some work to be done. This morning, I would like to share with you how COVID-19 and George Floyd changed our agency. I want to share about the Diversity and Inclusion Lab that we created to respond to this moment and what it has taught us about corporate culture, race, and privilege. And I do want to save a few minutes or two for you to ask any questions that you might have of me. But first, I have to share my race narrative. It might be surprising that a person of obvious African descent, born over 100 years after slavery was abolished, in a two-parent integrated household would have a race narrative. But anyone living in America has one. And living in post-COVID America, we must be willing to examine it and tell it. My first and number one rule when addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion is you have to do your own work. Who are your closest friends? Who are your natural affinity networks? When was the last time you advocated for someone of another race or gender to join a meeting, get an assignment, get promoted, or get a raise? The challenge is to explore how you think about race, what is your proximity, and what are you doing to fight racism? My race story is one of discrimination, but one also of privilege. As an educated Black woman, I certainly have privileges that also beget responsibility. My story begins in Arkansas, where my sharecropper parents picked cotton from a very early age. My mother was different than the other children because her grandmother, who raised her, did not let her go to the cotton fields during the school year. Instead, she was sent off to school. And I am told that my grandmother, Chester May, never missed one of my mother's schoolhouse presentations. This priority on education was something that my mother would take with her when she packed up and went to meet my father, who had already moved north, first to Chicago and then to the next town who would take him, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It was up north that my parents would attract the attention of a white family. While at a department store, a woman complimented my mother on her baby daughter's beautiful dress and asked to hold her. It was a different time then. As my mom reached into the stroller and placed me in the woman's arms, it was the first time that she had ever touched a white person. From that day forward, I would find myself touching whiteness as I attended majority schools, moved into a majority neighborhood, and at one point joined a majority church. My parents, like so many of their generation, believed that white was better. And unfortunately, for the quality of schools, they were right. So I attended schools with compliments like, "I don't even think of you as being Black, Arva," or "Arva, you speak so well," oh, or "Arva, you're so articulate." Today, they call these microaggressions, but then it was the price you paid for having smaller classrooms, more challenging curriculum, and an expectation that you would attend college. And I did attend college at a PWI, or predominantly white college, where I learned to speak about race with close friends, if at all. Then George Floyd happened, and suddenly everyone wants to talk about race. And as the CEO of the Urban League, I am asked to lead many of those discussions, and so I do. I spoke to the long-term partner who wanted me to hold a Zoom call with his sports team in New York City and Florida. I spoke to the CEO who cried on our call when he read the survey results from his Black staff members about the culture of his agency. I spoke to the people who called because they heard I was Black and led a Black agency. They wanted to write a check to prove that they were not racist. And I spoke to the people who realized that when they held a Zoom meeting and looked at all the boxes in the screen, that the boxes did not reflect the diversity of New York City. The conversations were exhilarating and hard. If eradicating systematic racism was easy or popular, it would be done already. When people have the opportunity to tell their race story, it can open up conversation. When George Floyd was murdered, we had just released our State of Black New York for the first time in over a decade. The State of Black New York is based on our national Urban League State of Black America that traces Blacks' well-being and advancement on a national level. Our report was focused on how Blacks were faring in 6 key areas: education, employment, healthcare, housing, civic engagement, and criminal justice. The State of Black New York found that over 50% of Black New Yorkers make $50,000 or less, and worse, 23% of Black adults live in poverty. Despite higher high school graduation rates, median household income for Black New Yorkers is half of white New Yorkers. College enrollment and completion rates remain lower. And for those on this call, these facts and figures are unfortunately very familiar. But for those whom I spoke to post George Floyd, they were stunned. So many had never really heard about Jim Crow laws or how the GI Bill skipped over Black members of the military. The systematic part of racism became more clear to those who had never had to address it before, because my conversation was grounded in data and also storytelling. For many years, my sister and I shared a brownstone in Harlem. She lived upstairs and I lived downstairs, and we affectionately referred to our place as Brownstone's Brown Girls. One day I was walking home and I noticed 2 cops standing over a man laying face down on the stairs of a house on my block. As I got closer, I realized the steps were to my very own house. And as I looked down at the fresh Nikes on the man on the stairs, I realized they were standing over my brother-in-law on the steps to his own apartment. As you can imagine, I was quite startled, a little taken aback, and honestly annoyed. So I approached the officers and asked them what was happening. They told me that they made a stop because my brother-in-law fit the description of someone who had committed a recent robbery. I let the officers know that the man they had stopped lived in the building and was my brother-in-law, at which point they apologized and walked away. After telling the story, I asked the people in the session to drop in the chat what I displayed in that interaction. They responded that I was polite, that I was orderly, that I handled the situation with calm. But one of the other things was that I was privileged. I interacted with the police officer as the owner of a brownstone, who assumed that I would be treated with respect, and that is a byproduct of privilege. As I continued my tour of corporations talking about the State of Black New York, it became abundantly clear that people wanted to not only learn, but wanted to take action. So we had to create something to help people move from asking for articles or books to taking actions in their workplaces. And admittedly, we had some stops and starts. We created a series that we did called Courageous Conversations About Race, which paired conversations with leaders such as Khalil Muhammad and Ray McGuire, Darren Walker and Valerie Jarrett, Wes Moore, and myself. They were Zoom conversations that were successful for fundraising, but quite honestly, did not move the needle. So we decided to try again. This time we created the Diversity and Inclusion Lab. The Diversity Inclusion Lab was created because we realized that the conversations that we're encouraging people to have in their nonprofits, in their corporations, in their workplaces are conversations that we don't have in our own homes or neighborhoods. New York City is more segregated now than it was even in 1965. On any given Sunday morning, whether you're at home at Bedside Baptist or at your church or mosque or synagogue, it is one of the most segregated times in American life and culture. But in our workplaces, we want individuals to come together, respect each other, and develop and problem solve. So we created the Diversity Inclusion Lab to create a space for chief diversity officers, recruitment specialists, HR professionals to come together and have conversations that they might not normally be able to have. We decided to bring together the best leaders in order to provide them with training and support around how do you create a supplier diversity program? How do you make sure that your philanthropic goals meet those that are most in need? And how do you look at your staffing and make sure that you have affinity groups and other ways in which to honor and promote diversity in your organizations? On the other side of our Diversity and Inclusion Lab, we created something called NYUL Connect. NYUL Connect is an online portal of the young professionals that come to our Urban League programming and others who are diverse and incredible talent, mostly college graduates, so that the members of our Diversity and Inclusion Lab can access when they say, I'm looking for a diverse accountant, that they can go onto the NYUL Connect and find that diverse talent. Our goal was to see if we could find 10 corporations who would be willing to experiment with us in our Diversity and Inclusion Lab. And it took a while, but in the end, Odyssey, Avalon Bay, Fidelis Care, JP Morgan Chase, National Grid, Salesforce, Macy's, the New York Power Authority, the New York Jets, and the New York Yankees joined the Diversity and Inclusion Lab. We wanted to teach and to learn. We wanted to bring scholars and practitioners in the space with diversity officers, recruitment managers, and even CEOs. We wanted to create something real and authentic that would extend the commitment to diverse workplaces beyond a hashtag or a couple of weeks of protest. Along the way, we learned about the needs of the 10 brand partners and more about diversity and inclusion. Yes, being invited to the party and being asked to dance. Now, I know that later this morning, you will have a breakout conversation on fundraising, so I do not want to be repetitive, but it has been fascinating to us the different ways in which our brand partners have engaged the lab. There were absolutely some that wanted to be associated with the Urban League brand, and at a time and space where their employees were asking what they were doing in regards to DEI, they wanted to say they were working with a legacy civil rights organization. Engaging their employees in our programming and attending events was a connection and affiliation that they desperately needed. There were some who were really looking for diverse staff and tapped into NYUL Connect or just picked up the phone and asked me. I often say, I know Black people. The last bucket were brands that already had DEI efforts, but were looking to NYUL to expand their base and their community connections. I thought the brands would come for DEI trainings by our curated experts, or to the lunch and learns where they were able to introduce their company to a diverse list of candidates curated by NYUL. And yes, they came for the trainings, but they also came for the connection to NYUL and each other. This January, we will host our second round of brand partners, and I am sure we will continue to learn from their involvement. The lessons that we have learned from COVID-19 are expansive. It may be cliche, but every crisis does create an opportunity to innovate, an opportunity to redesign, and an opportunity to fail. I'm always shocked when my board and staff do not love every idea that comes out of my mouth. But every once in a while, we have an opportunity to make big bets. And I encourage each and every one of you to take the risk. As I mentioned earlier, it is important to get in touch with your own race story. When did you know you were Black or white? And what did that mean for you? How are you showing up or not showing up as an ally? Realize that the leadership journey of Black people is different. Not better or worse, just different. We are still the first in so many settings. Our network may not include as many professionals. The wealth may not be as long-standing, if at all. We are also the products of our grandmother's wildest dreams. So give us a chance. I'm not trying to speak for every Black person here, but I have to believe your willingness to just acknowledge this difference will go a long way. So not only make a big bet, but bet on Black. Your employees know that you may not get this right all the time, but they want to see you try. So try to diversify your board, link up with a Black professional organization, sorority or fraternity, or even a local church to move from we should to we just did. Make diversifying your staff, your leadership, and your board a priority. Talk about it, strategize around it, and enlist others if necessary to achieve the goal. We all know that what gets measured must get done. And lastly, intentionally create a culture of inclusion. Diversity is about hiring and retention. Inclusion is about creating a sense of belonging. And inclusion can get measured, so get to work. The theme of today's conference is From Surviving to Thriving. I want to applaud each of you for the incredible ways that New York City nonprofits had to accelerate during our state's pause. You guided your staffs while serving your constituents. You remained steady in the midst of profound uncertainty. You pivoted and then had to pivot again. For that, I honor you and I salute you. Our communities and our city needs us more than ever before. By diversifying the leaders and problem solvers, we can continue to meet our community's greatest needs. Thank you for your attention today.
Arva, thank you so much. I really am very moved by your words, and I know you've given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure our audience as well. We do have some time for Q&A. Oh, you're getting applause, just so you know. We do have some time for Q&A, and I would ask everybody to please go ahead and click that Q&A at the bottom of the screen with your questions for Arva. I will start off with one question for you, Arva, because you said something really interesting. And I think everybody has the best intentions. Everybody wants to create diversity. It's how do we do it in an authentic manner? How do we do it? How would you recommend moving forward to open the door to more diversity within our organizations, within our boards of directors? How do we connect in an authentic and organic way?
Well, as I started to say, thank you for that question, and I do think it's one that resonates with a lot of different people. Like, how do you get this going and kind of push beyond your own feeling of uncertainty? Sometimes it's angst, quite frankly. You want to make sure that you're not offending people. For Black folks, you want to make sure that it doesn't trigger something for us, and then we get labeled as the angry fill in the blank, right? And so, how do you come to those conversations authentically? And I do think it really is around connecting with your own story, as I mentioned, right? So it is about our own story and our own privilege. And we all are privileged in some way. We woke up in this country, so being an American alone makes us privileged in some way. And so if we're able to start from that moment, it gives us an opportunity to not be as defensive, to be able to lean in and really listen, to be able to see another person's point of view. As I mentioned, speaking to these different corporations, I mean, I learned so much, right? Like being able to hear other people's perspective, where they were coming from, and being able to create a space where people felt safe in order to speak their truth. And I think that that's the most important thing. Set ground rules for the beginning of the conversation. Really take a look at your own privilege. Be willing and open to hear other people's truths and their realities. Sometimes we feel like we're in conversation and we get to judge or to validate or invalidate people's comments. That's not what we get to do. That's not what we get to do in this particular conversation. What people experienced is what people experienced. And being able to authentically listen to those conversations, I think, is where we absolutely need to start.
Thank you. And I think, the fact that you were able to use your adversity and create these amazing opportunities for the community, the NYUL community. It's amazing. And we do have a question in terms of, in reference to the lab. One of our attendees would like to know, saying that it is such a phenomenal resource and we were unaware of it. How do we get involved? How do we learn more? How do we support the lab?
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for your interest. Yeah, absolutely. Just, you can reach out to Alison and she can make the connection directly to us. You can also look at our website where there's information, www.nyul.org. And one of the things that I may or may not have mentioned in my conversation is what was so exciting about the lab is that it's an opportunity for us to meet a concrete need of the corporations, but it's also a way for people in our community to be able to access jobs, because it's still frustrating to me at this point that there are so many openings in some places, and then we still have individuals in our communities who are still looking for work. And so what is that disconnect, and how can the Urban League and other organizations that are a part of this conversation today serve as a better bridge in order to make sure that that communities that folks might not normally think about have access to those career opportunities.
Thank you. And I would like to, of course, offer to you to connect with the Nonprofit Resource Hub when you do have those opportunities, because we are always happy to share that on your behalf.
Absolutely.
We have another question for you. So this is from Diana. She says, thank you so much for the insightful talk, Arva. As a career interim ED/CEO, I sometimes come across board members or staff who express their organization should be doing more DEIA work, but they expect it to be done by others. Of course, this work can be triggering for some, and it's understandable in the case they want to pass. Any thoughts on what we can do as leaders to inspire others to not just talk the talk, but do the work and be that change?
Yeah. That's a tough one. Getting people to do the work is difficult, and I do think it's a combination of what we did with the corporations, right? Being able to make a clear case that diversity does matter, that when you bring people with different backgrounds and experiences to problem solving, that you come to better solutions. There's a direct correlation between diversity and results. Being able to give the examples of when people get to the other side, and also the fact that we're in a moment where folks are looking for talent. So if you wanted to live in homogenous places, you can't, even if you wanted to, right?
Mhm.
Because you're at some point you're going to need to reach out and work with others. And when those other folks come into your corporation, into your nonprofit, how are you going to make sure that you respect them? So I think that it's laying out the case, and then laying out the case again, right? And people respond to different things, right? So maybe it's the talent argument that you're making for them, if you're not just making it's the right thing to do. And I think as nonprofits, we have a tendency to always want to make it's the right thing to do argument, right? But we want to make sure that we can do it's the right thing to do, but also this is because of the talent pipeline that we're looking at, and also this is the way that we can do our work more effectively and with more innovation. And so I think it is about making that case, and then remaining true to it. You're going to get a lot of no's. Think about this as fundraising. We get no's all the time, and we continue to do it because we know we have to raise those dollars in order to support the work that we do. So DEI can't be abandoned any more than fundraising can be abandoned. And so we just need to make sure that people know that it's that important.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as nonprofit professionals, I think we can all agree that we don't take no personally.
Right.
we just keep on keeping on.
Keep it moving.
So
Yes.
thank you so much. I think the takeaway too is communication, education, connection. Let's get out of our silos. Let's continue to work together, to collaborate, to understand. And if we do this as leaders in the nonprofit sector, we are the beacons for the community. So I thank you so much for your time, for your story. I'm sure that you'll have a lot of follow-up. If you would like to connect with Arva after today's presentation, we simply ask that you email us at the Nonprofit Resource Hub, and we will be sure to send your questions to her or your email addresses to her, and she will follow through with you. Arva, again, thank you. Really what a way to start this conference. So much appreciated, and cannot wait to talk to you offline about other things that we can do together.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Alison.
So have a great day. I do want to let everybody know we are starting our first panel session shortly. They run from 10:15 to 11:15 a.m. If you look at the sessions tab on the top of your screen, click down. You are able to attend 2 of the panels right now. The first one is why you are not securing your donor dollars. The second is strengthening and protecting your board. So I hope that you really felt like you got something today and you're walking away feeling inspired by Arva. And now I invite you all to move to your panels. Thank you again, Arva. And I hope that you're able to stay with us for part of the day.
I most certainly will. Looking forward to the
Take care.
panel.
Have a great one. Thank
All
you.
right. Bye-bye.